Republicans are the party of hyper-individualism. They're only team players when there's something in it for them. I'm going to tell you about the pushing, the shoving, the screaming, the threats going on right now down at Mar-a-Lago. For real. Everyone thinks they're entitled to their cut, and Donald Trump loves watching them fight among themselves. He loves the chaos, which is why I'm telling you, if you're lucky enough to have an invitation for a free meal, go to Thanksgiving. Tell your MAGA cousin, congratulations. You won. Tell them they're right. Leave them alone, and they will feast upon themselves. Trust me on this. I'm watching it. More on this later on. The Times of London reports Donald Trump is prepared to sign an executive order throwing transgender troops out of the military. There are estimated to be 15,000 transgender soldiers in the American military. They will challenge that executive order in the courts. On Sunday, Congressman Kawisi Mfume, a Democrat from Maryland, warned Senate confirmations of Trump's nominees will be severely hampered because Trump is refusing to ask the FBI to conduct background checks. This is his new policy. No FBI background checks. And some are now warning Donald Trump that it's better that the FBI discovers things now about your nominees instead of revelations emerging about them during the confirmation hearings. Case in point, Pete Hegseth, Trump's pick for defense, was accused of rape back in 2017. Police concluded he was the aggressor. But because there was no FBI background check, his transition team, Trump's transition team, was caught flat-footed after it came out that Hegseth paid his accuser an undisclosed amount of money to keep everything quiet. Hegseth failed to tell them about the hush money payment, which would have come out had the FBI conducted a background check. It didn't help Pete Hegseth any when Oklahoma Republican Senator Markwayne Mullin went on the Sunday talk shows and said, quote, "There's no case here. He was falsely accused. She was being the aggressor. She was being the aggressor." He goes on to say, Pete wasn't even flirting with her. He was flirting with a different girl, and the Jane Doe was trying to flirt with Pete. This isn't looking good. This is why you need the FBI to look into these things before you make your announcement on who the nominee is going to be. Meanwhile, Texas Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett said on ABC News that Donald Trump is setting a record for most nominees accused of sexual assault. But Senator Bill Hagerty, a Republican in Tennessee, told CBS News that FBI checks are unnecessary because the American people are fine with Trump performing the background checks instead of the FBI. Sure we are. Matt Gaetz's name was withdrawn for Attorney General after several reports of drug use and sex with underage girls began to surface. Trump is said to now be blaming J.D. Vance for failing to get senators on board the Matt Gaetz nomination. Trump sent the junior senator from Ohio, J.D. Vance, soon to be vice president, he sent him down to the Capitol. He said, walk around with Matt Gaetz. Use your magic and sell the nomination to your colleagues. When Trump was told the senators wouldn't budge on Matt Gaetz, he started blaming J.D. Vance for not being a good salesman. The fighting, like I said earlier, is getting intense down at Mar-a-Lago. Reports are Howard Lutnick, the CEO of Cantor Fitzgerald, yes, that Cantor Fitzgerald, Howard Lutnick, who is the co-chair of Trump's transition team, he is not talking to hedge fund manager Scott Bessent after losing out Treasury Secretary to Bessent. The two reportedly got into screaming matches once Lutnick learned he was going to be sent off to Siberia serving as Commerce Secretary. Lutnick, by the way, is an anti-vaxxer. The Washington Post reports that the close advisor to Trump, Boris Epshteyn, pushed Howard Lutnick after Lutnick told Epshteyn he couldn't attend a Mar-a-Lago meeting last week that was being held to discuss hiring for the White House. Epshteyn said, "Who the hell are you? You're new here. I was with the original Trump White House." He reportedly shoved Lutnick, who was trying to block Epshteyn from entering the room. There was screaming and accusations. Epshteyn also reportedly got into a heated argument with Elon Musk at Mar-a-Lago as tempers flared over who should be Trump's pick for Treasury. A lot of screaming, a lot of acting out, a lot of backstabbing. No word as to what role Boris Epshteyn will play in this new Trump White House. He did briefly work in the White House Communications Office during Trump's first year as president. But in May, Epshteyn entered a plea of not guilty after being indicted by a grand jury along with Rudy Giuliani in Arizona for running the false elector scheme in that state back in 2020. In 2021, Epshteyn was arrested in Scottsdale, Arizona, after two women accused him of assault. He later entered a plea of disorderly conduct, disruptive behavior, and/or fighting with women. The conviction was erased from Boris Epshteyn's record after he sought treatment for alcohol abuse. In 2014, Boris Epshteyn was arrested for assault after getting into an altercation in a bar. Those charges were dropped after Boris Epshteyn agreed to undergo anger management treatment and perform community service. Yes, because the community needs the help from Boris Epshteyn. They're all fighting. Meghan McCain was reportedly shaking, quivering on Saturday after Kellyanne Conway confronted her backstage at the Washington Post Global Women's Summit. According to the Daily Beast, Kellyanne Conway got in Meghan McCain's face, pointed her finger, yelled at her for mocking her divorce, making fun of how Kellyanne Conway raised her children. Come on. I mean, I don't like Kellyanne Conway, but I would never make fun of Kellyanne Conway for her husband finally realizing what he was married to. I would never make fun of Kellyanne Conway for being a horrible mother whose daughter allegedly called the police and they were forced to do a welfare check on the inveterate liar's daughter because Kellyanne Conway lies for a living. I would never go after Kellyanne Conway. Republican Senator from Kentucky, Rand Paul, is once again breaking with the incoming Trump administration. You might remember last week he said he would oppose Trump declaring a national emergency in order to use the military to round up undocumented Americans. Yesterday he said, quote, "I don't like the president promoting tariffs. I think tariffs are a tax on the consumer." You think they're a tax on the consumer? They are a tax on the consumer. On Sunday, Senator Tammy Duckworth, she's a Democrat from Illinois, said Tulsi Gabbard is unfit to serve as our nation's director of national intelligence. Senator Duckworth said that she has no doubt Gabbard is compromised and is also a Russian asset. The New York Times reports this morning that Trump's transition team is funded entirely by secret donors. Traditionally, transition teams get roughly $7.2 million. Each cycle it goes up with inflation. But right now, the White House is offering Trump $7.2 million from the government to pay salaries, hotel, and travel for Trump's transition. But Trump has decided not to take government money, and instead he is accepting private and secret donations. Nobody knows who's going to get the money or where it's going to go. Trump's transition team is headed by Linda McMahon from the WWE, as well as his new nominee for Secretary of Education, Howard Lutnick. And you might remember Howard Lutnick is Trump's nominee for Secretary of Commerce. Some of the allegations against Lutnick was he was using his position as co-chair of the transition team to feather his own nest, shall we say. This is the mop-up for November 25th, 2024. I'm David Feldman in New York City. Thank you so much for finding me this holiday week. Please share this episode with your friends. And I'm now on Blue Sky. Please follow me on Blue Sky. I am weaning myself off from Twitter. I was never really on it, but I'm checking out Blue Sky, which has gone from 13 million users to 22 million users in the past 14 days as more and more people abandon Elon Musk's Twitter. Blue Sky only has 20 full-time employees, and they are reportedly working around the clock just to keep up with all the new users. Meanwhile, Trump's Truth Social only had 70,000 people using it in May. That's according to The Atlantic magazine. 70,000 users in May. But somehow Truth Social is valued by Wall Street as being worth close to $6 billion. Elon Musk is now said to have a net worth of $350 billion as stock in Tesla soars since the election. It's soaring despite his buddy, Donald Trump, promising to declare war on electric vehicles. The prosecutors will be prosecuted, the bad ones. The investigators will be investigated. That's what Pam Bondi, Trump's new pick for Attorney General, said last year about Trump's second term and what she thinks he should do about all the prosecutors who indicted him or convened grand juries. Get even. Politico reports this morning, however, that several January 6 defendants have expressed concern that Pam Bondi, as Attorney General, would be less sympathetic to their legal predicaments, less sympathetic than Matt Gaetz would have been. He made it clear that if he became Attorney General, he would free them. Trump campaigned, promising to investigate all the convictions related to January 6, and then he would occasionally promise to issue blanket pardons to what he called the political hostages. Bondi reportedly deleted several tweets right after January 6 where she condemned the violence. What are his supporters going to do if he doesn't free the Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys? David Dayen over at the American Prospect has a new piece entitled "When Pam Bondi Protected Foreclosure Fraudsters." It's a great piece. David Dayen writes, Bondi was elected Attorney General of Florida in the wake of the 2008 financial crash. Dayen has also written extensively about this in his book, which you should read. It's called Chain of Custody. We've had him on this show a couple of times. Writing in the American Prospect, Dayen says by 2010, banks around the country were being ordered to stop with the foreclosures when it was discovered these banks, these lenders, couldn't prove who actually owned the mortgages. Dayen says Florida was ground zero for unscrupulous lenders relying on foreclosure mills to manufacture fake documents in order to take possession of homes they didn't own. Dayen writes that Pam Bondi was elected Attorney General of Florida, receiving donations from Lender Processing Services. Lender Processing Services was, at the time, under investigation by Florida's Attorney General's Financial Crimes Unit for forging documents in order to foreclose. Dayen writes, immediately after winning election as Florida Attorney General, Bondi fired the two prosecutors looking into lender processing services foreclosure fraud. They were the ones who donated to her campaign. Dayen writes, the two prosecutors she fired were perhaps the country's leading experts on foreclosure fraud and could have assisted the 50 other state attorney generals nationwide. On the last show, I told you Bondi promised to join New York State in a lawsuit against Donald Trump for tax fraud. 4 days after she made that promise, she withdrew it after receiving a $25,000 donation from the Trump Charitable Foundation. After receiving the donation from the Trump Charitable Foundation, Bondi ignored 22 fraud complaints leveled against Trump University in the state of Florida. The IRS later ruled that Trump's donation to Pam Bondi was illegal. The IRS ordered Trump to pay a fine and reimburse the Trump Charitable Foundation, which was eventually shut down by the New York State Attorney General, Letitia James, and Donald Trump is not allowed to run a charity in New York State because of this. For some reason, one of my listeners corrected me and said Letitia James was not the New York State Attorney General when the charity was shut down. Yes, she was. She began serving as New York State Attorney General in 2019. Now, maybe she didn't begin the investigation into the Trump Charitable Foundation, but she most certainly was the New York State Attorney General when Donald Trump's charitable foundation got shut down. But please, if you think I got something wrong, leave a comment. I like to be corrected. There's an article in New Times. It's a alternative newspaper in Florida. It was written by Chris Joseph in July of 2014. And it's entitled, 8 Reasons Pam Bondi is the Worst Attorney General in Florida History. This was written 10 years ago. So I'm not going to go over all 8. I think I'm going to include 7. What are the reasons? She's good pals with Rick Scott, who was the governor at the time. He's now the Florida senator. Another reason is she warned Obamacare was a gateway to fraud. That's how she pitched not accepting Medicaid expansion under Obamacare to Governor Rick Scott. She warned Obamacare will be a gateway to fraud. Well, Rick Scott, before being governor of Florida, stole $1 billion from Medicare and Medicaid. At the time, it was the largest fine ever imposed, the largest health care fine ever imposed by the Department of Justice. And so telling Rick Scott Obamacare is a gateway to fraud, he's gonna love it. She said legalizing gay marriage would impose significant public harm. She vehemently was against legalized medical marijuana. She wrote an amicus brief urging the Supreme Court to overturn laws that raised the age of gun purchases to 22. She said people who are 18 or older should be allowed to buy guns. And she's in the pocket of polluters, according to Chris Joseph's piece in New Times back in 2014. She also supported an Arizona law permitting cops to ask for proof of documentation, proof that you're a citizen. The Supreme Court eventually ruled it's unconstitutional. All right. Where are we? Matt Gaetz, who was supposed to be Donald Trump's pick for Attorney General, announced he will not try to get his House seat back. Instead, Matt Gaetz is now on Cameo, charging $500 to record birthday greetings. Hey, Laura, it's Matt Gaetz. Congratulations, I hear you're legal finally. The election to fill Matt Gaetz's seat will be held on April Fool's Day of 2025. Gaetz this weekend promised to expose rampant insider trading among his former congressional colleagues. First on his hit list is Democratic Congressman Josh Gottheimer of New Jersey. He serves on the House Finance Committee. In May, Gottheimer purchased stock in a company called Fair Isaac. What is Fair Isaac? It's a financial credit score company that apparently Congressman Josh Gottheimer heard about while serving on the House Finance Committee. Share price for Fair Isaac has doubled since May. Meanwhile, Gottheimer announced he is running next year for governor of New Jersey. He's my sister's congressman. He refuses to hold town halls. Any Democrat who's running against Josh Gottheimer in the primaries is better than Josh Gottheimer. Project 2025 is all about Donald Trump hitting the ground running on day one, but it's starting to look like Trump might hit the ground crawling on all fours. Despite Republicans controlling both chambers, the majorities in Congress are much slimmer than Trump is willing to admit to himself. He's still convinced it was a mandate, anything but. Now, Republicans need 218 seats in the House to claim their majority, and they have it. They have it. But Punchbowl warns this morning that the Republican Party in the House might start on January with only a 220-seat majority. You need 218 to get control of the House. Punchbowl is warning they might only start the new Congress with a 220-seat majority. Why? Well, Matt Gaetz is gone. His seat won't be filled until May. The odious Republican Congresswoman Elise Stefanik is leaving Congress to become a UN ambassador. Republican Mike Waltz is Trump's pick for National Security Advisor, so he's leaving Congress. That could leave Donald Trump with just 220 votes in the House for his first 100 days, which means it would only take 3, maybe 2 Republicans to kill the entire Trump agenda. All it takes is 2 or 3 Republicans in the House, maybe 3, maybe 4 in the Senate, either or, to kill Trump's entire agenda. All it takes, if you can find 2 or 3 in the House or 3 or 4 in the Senate, Republicans, you kill Trump's agenda. What is Trump's agenda? Tax cuts for the richest 1% and for the corporations. Perhaps he's going to try to reverse the Inflation Reduction Act's massive funding for the Internal Revenue Service. And those tax cuts will be paid for by instituting work requirements for Medicaid, food stamps, and aid to dependent families. 2 or 3 in the House, or 3 or 4 in the Senate. You can't pick up a phone? You can't write these Republicans? Come on. Delaware State Senator Sarah McBride was elected to Congress. Here she is earlier this month for freshman orientation. She is the first transgender lawmaker ever to serve in Congress. And yes, she's a Democrat. Last week, Speaker Mike Johnson welcomed her by banning transgender women from using female congressional restrooms. Why? Well, WWJP, which means where would Jesus pee? Or as they call it in Louisiana, the miracle of turning beer into urine. or depending on what Jesus ate, the miracle of pinching loaves and fishes. Nancy Mace is the Republican congresswoman who introduced that bill banning McBride from using female restrooms. According to Jamie Dupree over at Regular Order, Nancy Mace is claiming to be the victim in all this. I've told you that the Republican Party is a repository of unresolved trauma. People refuse to get counseling, so they just decide, I'm going to become a Republican and lash out at others. Nancy Mace, sadly, was raped, and that's very sad. And she reminded everyone on Friday that she was raped, and that's why she introduced the bill. She said, quote, I've lost almost 30 pounds in the last 12 months due to PTSD from a deeply traumatic event. That is a rape that happened several years ago. She goes on to say, so keep mocking my looks and attacking women who survived abuse and who wear that abuse on the inside and out. The raging radical left's bullying, death threats, and words will never stop me from protecting those who are most vulnerable, our women and girls, unquote. Wow. Like I said, severe case of unresolved trauma. I'm very sad that Nancy Mace was raped. I really am. But she shouldn't be taking it out on the transgender community. She should be getting help. Now, she said people are making fun of her looks. I did last week say she looked like a fart. I'm going to retire to my chambers and consider whether that was wrong. The radical left's bullying, death threats? I mean, I know women get death threats. I don't know. If you're going after the transgender community, no, I don't. I'm not justifying the death threats. I'm just figuring out whether or not I should apologize for saying she looks like a fart. Let me come back to you on this. My gut says to apologize. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said she looks like a fart. But what does a fart look like? It's invisible. Jamie Dupree over at Regular Order says before the new year, Congress must prevent a government shutdown, which is scheduled for December 20th. Congress also has to pass the 2025 budget. That will require 12 funding bills to get passed before December 20th. That's not going to happen. There's going to be a continuing resolution. They also have to pass an emergency supplemental for hurricane victims. They have to pass or agree to delay the farm bill and pass the all-important defense policy bill. Punchbowl is reporting that Marjorie Taylor Greene will support Mike Johnson for Speaker. That's good news for Speaker Johnson. She spent most of this year trying to garner support to make him vacate the chair. She is not a fan of Mike Johnson. Marjorie Taylor Greene next year will chair a new oversight subcommittee where she will work with Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy to root out government waste. Well, just look in the mirror, Marjorie. When asked yesterday for an example of government waste, she said, sending toilets to Africa. That's what she gave up as an example of government waste. On Sunday, Marjorie Taylor Greene told Fox News her committee will recommend defunding sanctuary cities. As you know, Los Angeles is now a sanctuary city, and a lot of New York is a sanctuary city. A lot of blue cities are saying to Tom Homan, the former ICE director, who's going to be Trump's new border czar, We forbid the police, we forbid anyone who works for our city to assist you in rounding up undocumented workers. So I have some exclusive photographs of Tom Homan going undercover to sanctuary cities, trying to figure out what he's up against. What in these sanctuary cities? Let's see. Here's Tom Homan at a dance club in San Francisco, trying to figure out if any of the bartenders have their papers. He's asking to show his papers. Here he is in Los Angeles, just relaxing after a long day of looking for undocumented workers. Here he is walking through New York City. Very cold day in New York City. That's Tom Homan undercover, doing what he does best, looking for migrants. And here he is. He finally found one. Here he is rounding up a migrant. That's Tom Homan, the new border czar and former head of ICE. And here's his family. They like to terrorize migrants together because he's a very healthy man who isn't traumatized. He's a very healthy, happy man who's very giving to his wife in bed. We know that because people who dedicate their life to separating children from their mothers, everything works downstairs for them. No, they're not crushing ED pills. They're not downloading bizarre Brazilian stag films on Thor. They're just really well adjusted. We know that from history. People like Tom Homan are very well adjusted when it comes to their down under. This is the mop-up for November 25th, 2024. I'm David Feldman in New York City. Please share this episode. Please hit the like button so I remain in your feed. And what else? Okay. I think that covered. And check out the garbage over at Shop David Feldman. This POS, Chris Wallace, announced he is leaving CNN. I didn't even know he was at CNN. I watch CNN. They say he's walking away from his $7 million a year contract. Chris Wallace was being paid $7 million a year for David Feldman not to know he was at CNN. He left Fox News 3 years ago, and he came over to CNN where they paid him $7 million. Chris Wallace. Wow. Now, Rachel Maddow, on the other hand, she's a team player, and she's taking a pay cut over at MSNBC. You might have already heard that MSNBC is about to be spun off by its parent company, Comcast. And according to new reporting in The Ankler by Lachlan Cartwright, Rachel Maddow, team player, has agreed to a pay cut. And it's a pretty bad pay cut. But she's a liberal. She's in tune with the working class. So it's not about the money. Rachel Maddow, it's pretty bad. She agreed to go from $30 million a year to just $25 million a year. Albert Schweitzer. I mean, seriously, why even show up to work? She must love it that much. It's not about the money. It's like my parents always said, do what you love and the money will come. She's doing what she loves, but 25 million, how does she live? How is she going to live? So 30 million a year, get out your calculators. 30 million a year divided by 75,000 a year comes to 400 people. You could hire a newsroom of 400 journalists and pay them $75,000 a year each. Or you could give Rachel Maddow $30 million a year. $75 grand a year to 400 people. Now, that doesn't include benefits, so you could probably hire a newsroom of about 300 people and give them benefits. Or you could have a newsroom that convinces Americans to push for Medicare for all that includes free eye and dental, and then you could hire 400 full-time journalists, pay them 75 grand a year, and you don't have to give them benefits. The government is doing that. But you know how corporate America is. They like to be the ones doling out the benefits. That way, their workforce is malleable. You work longer hours. You don't ask for overtime because of the benefits. See, corporate America doesn't want Medicare for all. They use health insurance as a cudgel to keep their workers in line. But anyway, you could pay 400 full-time journalists $75,000 a year for $30 million, or you can give it all to Rachel Maddow. Why, you ask, should you pay a liberal like Rachel Maddow $30 million a year? Because once you convince Rachel Maddow she's actually worth $30 million a year, you can convince her of anything. This is the trick they play on the minds of liberals. So, this is what isn't noise. This is signal. Medicare for all. Free tuition at all public universities. Tax oil companies out of existence. Raise the minimum wage to $20 an hour. Repeal Taft-Hartley so it's easier for unions to organize. Bring back postal banking so credit card companies and banks can't nickel and dime the working class to death. Repeal the Faircloth Amendment, which puts a limit on how much low-income housing the federal government can build. Those are the important issues. Everything else is noise. Everything else is the straw man. Ah, yes, the straw man. What is the straw man? Well, if you secretly are opposed to all those things, but you don't want to admit it because you're rich, but, you really don't want to pay for any of that stuff. If you enjoy branding yourself as a liberal, enjoying your $30 million a year salary, then you hide behind a smokescreen of cultural issues. Important ones, like being in favor of abortion, as long as you don't have to pay for any, as long as you don't have to give out Medicare for all and put health insurance companies out of business and make abortion free. As long as you don't have to pay for it, you support the LGBTQ community. As long as you don't have to pay for all the things the LGBT community is desperately in need of, especially teenage members of the LGBTQ community, like free mental health care, free homeless shelters, free housing. Most runaways are members of the LGBTQ community. That means the federal government has to repeal the Faircloth Amendment and start building more low-income housing, free pharmaceuticals, all for the LGBTQ community, which they desperately need. But if you're making tens of millions of dollars a year, you say you're for the LGBTQ community, but you're not willing to actually pay more taxes to help them. You say you support marginalized communities, but you're not too keen on reimagining the police. So they do more than just protect property. You won't call for the elimination of ICE. You'll cry every year when you see children in cages, but you won't do the righteous thing, the moral thing, and call for the elimination of ICE. Instead, you say the Democratic Party has to be joyful and not be populated by scolds. We don't want any scolds in the Democratic Party. And after your Democratic Party loses, you create the straw man. You create the straw man argument and claim every 4 years, or if you lose the midterms every 2 years, this happens. The rich plutocrats in the Democratic Party blame the loss on the left, the intolerant left. Yes, and we're seeing it right now. We're hearing Democrats lost because they're too woke. The working class, according to the rich and powerful who control the Democratic Party, they know what the working class is thinking. And they say the working class doesn't like being talked down to. They're sick of hearing about transgender issues. That's what all the wise, sagacious multimillionaires who control the Democratic Party are telling us. It's a straw man argument. Kamala Harris, as well as the down ballot Democrats, didn't run on any of the stuff these rich, pompous, arrogant, effete, multimillionaire, out-of-touch Democrats claim they ran on. The Democrats ran specifically on inflation. Kamala Harris said inflation is the biggest problem facing voters, and it's because of price gouging. It's because there are fewer corporations, so they get to charge more. That's what she talked about, but that would require all these pontificators to actually listen to her speech, not listen to Bruce Springsteen or James Taylor at the rally, but actually listen to what Kamala Harris was saying, or, God forbid, read her platform. We wouldn't want that, would we? So I read her platform. This was her platform, okay? It's entitled, A New Way Forward for the Middle Class. The very first thing you see, A New Way Forward for the Middle Class. Now, everybody is saying Kamala Harris abandoned the working class and the middle class. Her slogan was A New Way Forward for the Middle Class, which, by the way, I didn't think was a winning message. But the multimillionaires who control the Democratic Party wanted Kamala Harris to address the needs of the middle class, which she did, but now they're accusing her of not addressing the needs of the middle class. I don't think it's a winning message. Nobody's middle class. Nobody even knows what middle class means. Do you feel you're middle class? According to the Pew Research Center, a middle income for adults in America is anywhere between $56,000 to $170,000 a year. Now, that's not middle class, that's middle income. And it's confusing because it all depends on the size of your family, the number of dependents, and of course, where you live. If you're earning $56,000 all the way up to $170,000, you fall into the middle class. What does that mean? It means nothing. What it means is nobody calls themselves middle class because nobody knows what middle class means. If you're a single man earning $56,000 a year and living in Alabama, I can assure you, you feel richer than a woman earning $170,000 a year with a stay-at-home dad and 3 kids to support, plus paying off college debt. There's no such thing as the middle class. There's rich and there's poor. There's the 1% and the 99%, because when wealth is concentrated in the hands of so few people, you can't have a middle class. But the 1% who control the Democratic Party accuse Kamala Harris of failing to reach the middle class. Well, how can you reach people who don't exist? But she tried, and all the Monday morning quarterbacks are accusing her of not listening to them. A new way forward for the middle class. Okay. Now, the rap against all these pundits on CNN, MSNBC, Joe Manchin, is Democrats have lost touch with the working class, the middle class. They ignored inflation. It's too expensive to live in America, which it is, which is what Joe Biden and Kamala Harris were talking about on day one. So, to all you POSs who accuse Joe Biden and then Kamala Harris and Democratic candidates of ignoring inflation, let me show you the platform, okay? That's all you had to do before you pontificate. This is the table of contents, okay, for her platform, for the Democratic Party's platform. Priority number 1, lower costs for middle-class families. How dare anyone say that Kamala Harris and the Democrats didn't address inflation or the middle class? Now, personally, I don't think that's a winning message. I'm not concerned about the middle class. I'm not concerned about families. What is a family? What does a family even mean? It's a bullshit conceit, a family. Even Kamala Harris said that the word family means nothing. Most families in this country are one parent. Most families are extensions of relatives and friends. Families in America, this is what Kamala Harris said. Our families in this country are a combination of blood and choice. Where are you going for Thanksgiving? Are you going with your family or the people you choose? Family and middle class, these are hollow slogans that mean nothing. But you cannot say that the Democrats ignored the needs of the middle class, which doesn't exist, or families, which are non-existent. They don't mean anything. But look at this. The first promise, lower costs for middle-class families. Cut taxes for working people. Well, at least she didn't say folk. That's her first promise. Cutting taxes for working people. Yeah, you see, that's her obeisance to the neoliberals in the Democratic Party. Cut taxes. That's not the winning message. The winning message is raise the minimum wage to $20 an hour. Rent subsidies, food subsidies. Not sure a tax cut is what tops the list for most voters. Is that the issue that concerns most Americans, that taxes are too high? If you think taxes are too high, then you're going to vote for Donald Trump. He's promising to lower taxes for the rich, maybe a little for the middle. You know he's a liar, but he promised something like 100 million Americans wouldn't have to pay income tax anymore. And how is he going to lower taxes for everybody? On the backs of the people whose taxes he's lowering, by cutting Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security, getting rid of food stamps, work requirements for aid to dependent families. When I see a promise to cut taxes as a Democrat, the first thing I smell is fiscal austerity. If this is your first promise, I smell austerity. Lower taxes mean fewer government services. Number 2, let's look at it. Everyone is full of SHIT, which spells shit. How do I go big here? Where am I? Okay. What is number 2? Lower food and grocery costs. How do you do that? How about you go with Coach Walsh's program in Minnesota, which is free breakfast and lunch for all school children all year round, no questions asked. That's a winning message. When I heard that was what Coach Walsh had done, I thought, well, you just lead with that. Never heard about it. Never heard about the free breakfast and lunch for all school children all year round, no questions asked. Number 3, lower health care costs. That is not a winning message, lowering health care costs. Americans don't pay too much for health care. They pay too much for health insurance. When you say lowering costs for health care, it suggests you're in the pocket of the health insurance companies. I need someone to lower my health insurance payments. Better yet, a winning message is getting rid of the health insurance companies altogether. And instead of lowering my health care costs, take away my health care costs. Make health care free, the same way it is pretty much in the rest of the industrialized world. Look at this, lowering health care costs. They can't even bring themselves to use the words health insurance. Health insurance, for-profit health insurance. The problem isn't health care, God damn it. The problem is health insurance. How are you going to solve the health care crisis in America if you can't even say the words health insurance? Now, I'm not blaming Kamala Harris. This is the platform that she got talked into. But instead of listening to Barry Diller, Jeffrey Katzenberg, George Clooney, the consultants, instead of listening to David Plouffe and all the people from Obama world who created Obamacare, which is a love letter to the health insurance companies, instead of having them write your platform, how about checking in with Katie Porter, Cori Bush, Summer Lee, Elizabeth Warren, AOC, and of course, Bernie Sanders. Number 4, lower prescription drug costs. How about free insulin? How about promising that the government will create compound pharmacies to produce drugs that are too expensive? How about that? How about the government gets a piece of any pharmaceutical the NIH paid to be researched? What is next? 5, lower energy costs. No. See? This is how you infantilize voters. Gas is about $3 a gallon, pretty low. The promise, if you wanted to treat voters like adults, would be taxing fossil fuels, making it more expensive to load your car with gasoline, and providing even more tax incentives for alternative energy. That's a winning message to me. Number 6, and then I'm done. Lower costs by protecting consumers from fees and fraud. Lower costs by protecting consumers from fees and fraud. How about locking up the bankers and the payday lenders? How about putting the payday lenders out of business? Okay? How about passing laws that make it illegal for credit card companies to lend money at biblically usurious interest rates. There were hearings last week. Visa and MasterCard charge $100 billion a year to merchants in fees, in swiping fees. How about breaking up Visa and MasterCard? Well, you don't want to. Tony West would advise against that. Her brother-in-law, who's general counsel over at Uber. His advice is you want to come across as a populist, but you don't want to do anything that's going to jeopardize your brother-in-law's bank account. I'll tell you something about Donald Trump. I disagree with him on everything, but at least he knows how to scapegoat. At least he knows how to get people mad and vote revenge. Democrats offer no bloodlust. Where is the bloodlust here? Where is the justice? Where's the promise to punish the greedy who steal money, extract wealth from our economy, and destroy lives? Health insurance companies kill at least 55,000 people a year. Those are people who have health insurance but can't afford to use it. When I'm looking at this party platform, this is less a party platform and more like what you see at Disney's website under our corporate values. This is corporate values. Again, Medicare for all. Free tuition at all public universities. This is what other countries in Europe have. The oil companies tax them out of existence. Raise the minimum wage to $20 an hour. Repeal Taft-Hartley so it's easier for unions to organize, especially down south. Bring back postal banking. Don't lower the costs of fees that banks and credit cards charge. Bring back postal banking. Let the government deposit your money and pay you interest if you're not happy with the fees that JP Morgan Chase is charging you. Bring back. We used to have postal banking, but the bank said, it's not fair. We can't compete with the post office. Oh, the banks can't compete with the post office. The banks can't compete with the inefficient government, right? Repeal the Faircloth Amendment so the government can get back into the business of building housing for Americans. This is why we have a homeless crisis. None of this stuff is complex. But the Democrats won't address, the people who run the Democratic Party won't offer real populism. So voters fall for Trump's faux populism. Politico reports that polling of swing states now shows Harris underperformed in blue cities, while Trump overperformed in suburbia and rural areas. People who live in blue cities, and all cities are blue, they stayed home. They stayed home in Philadelphia. Because what was the Democratic Party offering in terms of putting money in my real money in my pocket? Democratic pollster Nick Gorovich told the Washington Post that Kamala Harris lost the presidential election because voters said they were concerned about the economy and inflation. Well, if you offer Medicare for all, if you offer free tuition at all public universities, if you promise to raise the minimum wage to $20, if you take on the banks, break up the banks, That's how you address voters' concern about inflation and the economy. And anybody who says, well, it's more complicated than that, congratulations on making $10 million a year. Anybody who tells me, well, it's way more complicated than this, congratulations. You're making a couple of $1 million a year. Get out of the Democratic Party. Get out of this party. Former NBC and MSNBC anchor Brian Williams hosted election coverage for Amazon Prime. And he went on Seth Meyers' show on NBC after the election to opine, to explain what exactly happened. Because, God forbid, he just report the news. No, he's got to tell us how smart he is. He said, this is why the Democrats lost. This is Brian Williams. He was the NBC anchor, and then he was the MSNBC anchor, and now he's got a gig over at Amazon. And he said, I think the biggest unforced error of the Biden administration by far was the border. To tell people it's not a problem is insulting. It's not a problem. And your job as a anchor person is to tell people it's not a problem. That's your job. But you're an idiot. Is that insulting? The people at the border are not a problem. They are a gift. But don't ask me. Ask the Republican governor of Ohio, DeWine. Ask the business people in Springfield, Ohio, about the Haitian immigrants. They are a gift. Ask the hundreds of mid-sized cities offering people as much as $15,000 to move and work there, Brian Williams. You suck at your job. You insult the intelligence of your viewers by not telling them that hundreds of mid-sized cities are desperate for these migrants. Did you ever read The American Prospect, Brian Williams? You would know that undocumented Americans pay $100 billion a year in state, local, and federal taxes. They also pay into Medicare, Social Security, and unemployment insurance despite not being able to collect any of it. You're insulting Brian Williams. And then he goes on, and one of the things the gift he has is to sound authoritative, like he actually knows what he's talking about. He goes on to say, for the working class to see incoming migrants getting welcome bags, debit cards, and motel rooms is insulting as well. Well, the only reason they heard about that is because you reported it instead of reporting on how grateful the businessmen in Springfield, Ohio are for the migrants, instead of reporting about the $100 billion a year that migrants pay in taxes, local, state, and federal, as well as Medicare, Social Security, unemployment insurance. Welcome bags? You're offended by welcome bags given to mothers and their children, or a motel room, that is soap and toothpaste? That's offensive to you? Go F yourself, you POS. He says, so there's a lot of work to do. Yeah, you have a lot of work to do. You're pretty much done, and you should stay done. Then he opines, Brian Williams, I think it's insulting when members of the working class, which the Democratic Party has lost entirely in our lifetimes, to insist the economy's doing great. Wow. I think it's insulting when members of the working class, which the Democratic Party has lost entirely in our lifetimes, to insist the economy is doing great. So he's saying that Kamala Harris and Coach Walsh and Joe Biden have spent the past 4 years telling the working class that the economy is doing great. No, they weren't. Every State of the Union, he would brag about bringing down unemployment, which he did, but he kept saying there's much more work to be done. Inflation is still a problem, and we need to create more jobs for people who don't have college degrees. The Bipartisan Infrastructure Act, the CHIPS Act, the Inflation Reduction Act. Who was that for, Brian Williams? Who was that for? The stimulus bill? The expanding the child tax credit, which lifted more people out of poverty than any program in American history that was left to expire because of the Republican Party. The eviction moratorium, which the Supreme Court ruled was unconstitutional. How glib and self-assured Brian Williams is. He knows why the Democrats lost, because Joe Biden kept saying to voters, Kamala Harris kept saying to voters, the economy's great. They weren't saying that. I was saying it. Democrats weren't saying it. They were trying to pass more legislation, pass more executive orders to forgive student debt, which the Supreme Court ruled was unconstitutional. Joe Biden found some workarounds for that and has relieved, I don't know, $100 billion worth of student debt. Where do you get off saying, quote, the Democratic Party has lost the working class in our lifetime? Entirely lost the working class. Wow. He says a 12-pack of Bounty is $40. Wow. He's in touch. You know, he knows what milk costs. Good on you, Brian Williams. He says rich folks don't feel that. Poor folks do. And I think telling them that the NASDAQ is gangbusters is further insulting. It's insulting. When did Joe Biden brag about the stock market? When did Kamala Harris brag about the stock market? See, he's in a bubble. He doesn't read. And what he does is he talks to his other rich friends, or he talks to, he's also a volunteer fireman out in New Jersey, and he talks to some firemen who say to him, I don't like being talked down to. That's where he gets his information from Pete. Instead of reading books and studies and finding out what's actually going on in the real world, he talks to real people and gets anecdotal evidence from his a-hole firefighter friends in New Jersey. That's where he gets this information. We don't like being talked down to about the transgender issues because your firefighter friend said that to you, Brian Williams. Why don't you try reading the American Prospect or The Nation or the Daily Kos or The Economist or the Washington Post or the Los Angeles Times or the Miami Herald? Why don't you try reading instead of picking up anecdotal evidence and thinking, oh, you know, I got my finger on the pulse of America by talking to these moronic New Jersey firefighters. Firefighters, they get all the women. That's my problem with firefighters. Women, you tell a woman you're a firefighter. I got this NYPD cap that I wear. I won't wear a New York firefighter cap because I couldn't handle all the women who would come to me if they thought I was a firefighter. Brian Williams. How dare you? How dare you? Headline from Variety. NBC's Brian Williams admits he told false story about Iraq expedition. People go, why are you bringing this up? This was 9 years ago. Why are you bringing this up? Because of the garbage he just spewed. I want people to remember who Brian Williams is. This is from Variety. Brian Williams, the most watched, February 4th, 2015. Brian Williams, the most watched evening news anchor on television today, has acknowledged that he falsely claimed to have been on a helicopter that was shot down by enemy fire while on an NBC News reporting trip in Iraq in 2003. This is stolen valor, okay? He's guilty of stolen valor. Williams told and retold a story about how he and an NBC News crew had been aboard a Chinook helicopter that was forced down by rockets and small arms fire. In reality, according to crew members who were aboard the fallen Whirlybird, Williams and his crew landed near the downed helicopter due to an impending sandstorm about to erupt in the Iraqi desert. He would go on Letterman, he would go on The Tonight Show and tell the story over and over again about his chopper being shot down while he was covering the war in Iraq. His recounting of the harrowing plane trip was, as it turns out, specious. Specious. It was an effing lie. Brian Williams told the military-focused outlet, Stars and Stripes, military-focused outlet, the newspaper, Stars and Stripes, in an interview published Wednesday, that he was on a different plane that was never under fire and that landed safely about an hour behind one that had. Quote, I would not have chosen to make this mistake, Williams said in the interview. I don't know what screwed up in my mind that caused me to conflate one aircraft with the other. Oh, I can tell you, you're a liar. You want to sound braver than you actually are. Variety writes, and yet, as the newspaper, Stars and Stripes, determined, Williams had told this false story several times since making the 2003 trip. So, Brian Williams was fired as the anchorman from NBC News. I thought this was like the worst thing you can do. I mean, it's one thing to lie, but if you're the anchorman for NBC News to lie repeatedly about being shot down in Iraq, and then on top of that, stolen valor, in a different time, that would be a career ender. Instead, they didn't make him take a cut in salary. They put him over at MSNBC, and he anchored the news there up until a couple of years ago. Now he's over at Amazon opining, telling the Democrats what they need to say. Well, why don't we just lie? Why don't we do what you do and say, we've given you Medicare for all? The arrogance of these pricks. Well, he suffered enough. I don't think so. I don't think he suffered. He was embarrassed. You know, you do something like that, it's white men. White men, we forgive. He suffered enough. What, do you want Rudy Giuliani to be homeless? No, I want him to go to prison. Brian Williams, do I want him to be homeless? No. I think there are other people more qualified to anchor news shows on MSNBC or now Amazon Prime. In fact, I know there are people who are more qualified. Rachel Maddow gets $30 million a year? Jon Stewart deserves it. Nobody can do what Jon Stewart does. Nobody can do what Jim Carrey does. But Rachel Maddow, it's like the Harvard thing. You know, costs $200,000 to send your kid to Harvard for 4 years. How much information is Harvard giving your idiot kid that it's worth $200,000? What is Rachel Maddow imparting that's so wise that she deserves $30 million? Like I said, you could have a newsroom of 400 real journalists for $30 million, paying them $75,000 a year. I guess what I'm saying is everybody's full of shit, including me. I'm David Feldman, reminding you to stay strong and protect the weak. All right, I'm wrapping it up. Please follow me on Blue Sky. Share this episode with your friends. Thank you to Bob and Mila in the chat room for keeping the conversation civil. Please leave a comment. I read all your comments. If you think I made a mistake, please let me know. Somebody corrected me on Letitia James, but I understand why you corrected me, because she had become Attorney General in 2019, but she was the one who officially put an end to the Trump Charitable Foundation. Please go to shopdavidfeldman.com, pick up this worthless garbage over there, like the coffee mugshot of Donald Trump, Trump's mugshot, a souvenir from the 2029 inaugural ball with Melania and Donald Trump. Not too soon to get your Trump 2028 coffee mug. If you're going to the Trump inauguration, pick up a Trump fart filtration mask over at Shop David Feldman. It's the one the pros use. Some of you might want to carry an Appeal to Heaven flag, but I'm selling an Appeal to D's Nuts flag. Isn't that beautiful? An Appeal to D's Nuts. This is what you bring to the inauguration. Cassidy is modeling. What is this? Oh, my God. My nephew Leonard is going to film school now, and he made a promo for me. I didn't have a chance to. Uncle David Ferdman. All right, it's Feldman. Uncle David Ferdman presents The Mope Up. The Mope Up? The Mop Up. Okay, Leonard. It's not the Mope Up, and it's not David Ferdman. Pick up a Still a Democrat coffee. The Mope Up? My sister's son. Jesus. And now it's going to be an issue. See, now at Thanksgiving, this is what's going to happen. Where is it? Okay? Leonard wanted to be a stunt man, right? Where is it? But he has agoraphobia. So now my sister's sending him to film school, and I get this call. Oh, Leonard made a little promo, like a movie trailer for your show. And it's Uncle David Ferdman presents The Mope Up. Now at Thanksgiving, I'm going to go, that's great, Leonard. That's great. Because if I say you misspelled your uncle's last name as well as the mop up, it's the mop up, not the mope up, I'm a bully. I'm insensitive. Okay. And Donald Trump in the scream. God, I hate my life, Leonard. And Thanksgiving is coming up. Pick up, I hope you're in the mood for Diarrhea Chef's Apron, my biggest seller. It really is. That's what people buy. That's it. I'm doing a show early Wednesday morning at 2:30. And then I'll do one early Saturday morning at 2:30. That's my schedule. What else do I have here? I think that's it. Okay. The mope up. All right, everybody. What, we got another one? What's this? Well, that's nice. Well, that's nice, Leonard. All right. I'll see everybody later. Bye. Thank you.